Hey everyone, and welcome back to the AgeTech Connect podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Cottmeyer. Senior living has gotten a bad rap, and it's about time that we give life in old age a rebrand. In today's episode, I will be sitting down with Brett Arndt, the CEO and founder of ExF, to talk with him about how he's doing exactly that. If you're an AgeTech product or senior living operator that wants to tell a brand story that connects deeper with the older adults you serve, this episode is for you. Now that we've formally started the podcast, good to formally meet you, Brett.
It's good to meet you, Daniel. It's good to meet you.
So overall today, I want to be talking about giving aging a rebrand. I love that idea because I don't think there's anything in the world that needs a rebrand more than aging, and specifically, going into senior living or
Yeah.
moving out of your home, right? I mean, how bad of a rap has this gotten in the branding scene?
I mean, when we grew up, right? Like when you thought about when we were younger, when you thought about senior living, it was like nursing
Mhm.
home. Like that was it. Right.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
we all visited like grandma in a nursing home. And it was
Mhm.
one of those things you're like, I will never, ever go into a senior living
Yeah.
nursing
Mhm.
home. From where we are now, right? We have the opportunity to step in. I mean, we've been in, I mean, hundreds, if not thousands of senior living communities all over the country. And from full continuum of care to the most amazing luxury experiences, it is the furthest thing from a nursing home
Yeah.
possible. And it still needs a ton of attention around it. And it needs a ton of really awareness around what the aging industry is now and what specifically what senior housing is.
For sure, because aging adults have changed so much, and with that, I mean, the way that we care for aging adults has changed so much. I mean, I always think about you talk about going into a nursing home or a senior living
Mhm.
home. I think of Happy Gilmore, where
Oh, yeah.
his grandma gets put in with Ben
Yeah.
Stiller's character, pretty much running a sweatshop out
Yeah.
of there. It's like I feel like
Yeah.
that's the kind of branding that senior living has gotten, over the
Pulled
past,
pulled
20 years.
landscaping duty. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Grandmas, getting put to work out there. So it's like super excited to see somebody like you giving aging a rebrand. Before we get into exactly how we're doing that, tell me a little bit about your background. So
Yeah.
obviously you're the branding guy, you're the advertising guy. How'd you get into it? How'd you get so passionate about brand?
Well, it's a good story. I'm glad we have an hour for this
Mhm.
podcast.
Yeah.
I'll give you the shorter version. So my background actually was in early stage startups. I worked for a number of different startups through my 20s and kind of fell in love with advertising. Actually didn't know what it was, right? I didn't know what was the kind of inherent idea behind advertising. What I knew was that I loved connecting people with the brands that we were building. And I was talking to a friend and a mentor of mine. I was like, talking about what I love doing. He's like, that's you should look into advertising. Like that's advertising. Like that's the industry that really, kind of is in line with your passion and, what you love to do. I remember when I was like, okay, I'm going to go after this agency world. I'm really going to give this a shot. I was probably 26, 27. I threw my resume out to a half a dozen agencies here in St. Louis, which is a really unique agency hub. Anheuser-Busch brought all this creative, right? Really, really cool scene creatively. Every response back was no. They're like,
Yeah.
if you want to work in advertising, you need agency experience. So I was like, well, I've been in startups, so I'm going to start my own thing. So that was actually how Experience Fresh, or EXF as we call it now, was started. I founded it back in 2011 as a consultancy and really to bring fresh ideas and perspectives to different brands. And like every startup story, right, had some really amazing people who believed in me and believed in the ideas that we were building along the way. And so I operated it as a consultancy from 2011 to 2019, early 2020. And said, hey, I'm going to go all in on this. And I had a few other friends that were also consulting or in the industry, was telling about this vision of what we could build together. And they were crazy enough to quit their jobs. And three of us went all in on Experience Fresh in 2020 and really launched EXF to what it is today. So,
Kind of digging in, you've referred to it as a consultancy and as
mhm,
advertising, as somebody who's not directly in that space. When I think of advertising, I think of like Mad Men, like
yeah.
I pitch and I give an ad and then we put it out on TV. It's like, obviously, that's not how brands are built and
Mhm,
awareness is built today. So, what does that look like as
yeah.
you're doing this consultancy? What sorts of things are you consulting on?
So when it was just a consultancy, it was a lot of how can we working primarily with earlier stage companies, was a lot around strategy of brand and go to market. So
Yeah.
how can we take the either early stage product, the MVP, the idea that's in our head or that we raised the first round of funding for, and then really can you put the skin around this idea to be able to make it viable within the marketplace? So
Yeah.
that's kind of the consultancy side of what we were doing. And then when we kind of flipped to agency, we said, okay, we're no longer just getting paid for ideas. We're no longer just putting out ideas, concepts. We're actually doing the work. So I would think when you think about the difference of consultancy versus agency, it's really that, right? An agency is able to not just take the idea, but have the team to be able to execute on their concepts and then ultimately be able to measure the results of those concepts.
And I think that fits your niche perfectly as a person coming from that startup background because when you're running a startup, you're doing everything on your own. So the branding, the advertising, creating the product. And so do you feel like with that background, you're able to create a brand and create those advertisements or create those marketing plans with a broader idea in mind that allows you to really almost guide the direction of the product as you're guiding the direction of the brand and how the
Yeah.
community is viewing it?
Yeah, I think what's so unique about our position is that a lot of agencies are run by creatives, right? Because they're passionate about their work. We're super passionate about creative, but we run the agency and I run the agency more of running it like a startup or running it like a business, right? We're no longer in startup mode, which is great because those were
That is
wild
very good.
times.
Yeah.
So we're out of that phase, right? Where, there's 35 plus employees in the agency. We have this really amazing track record with our clients. We kind of feel like, we're breathing that sigh of release of out of startup mode. But
Yeah.
I think that being able to relate to that journey, but also being able to talk about KPIs, be able to
Mhm.
say, these are the ways that we're going to measure the success of our work together is something that really doesn't just speak to the VPs of marketings and the CMOs, that speaks all the way up to the board level. And I
Yeah.
think that where agencies have gotten in trouble in the past, right, is really this idea of trying to measure a return on everything. I mean, there's some things that you just can't measure a return on, and you just have to be authentic with that and be honest with that. Specifically around branding, I mean, the decisions that you make, that I make when I walk out of our office, right? A lot of those decisions are going to be made on feeling and emotion, right? And that's
Yeah.
branding, right? They're making those decisions because of the trust that was built with a product. And a lot of that's not measurable. The side of the agency house that's digital and that has that attribution story where we're tracking click-throughs and we're tracking conversions, like that's measurable. But where agencies have gotten in trouble in the past is they kind of group that all together and try to explain an ROI around that instead of coming in and saying, we're going to create things that aren't going to have a 3x ROAS, or they're not going to have a lowered customer acquisition costs. We're going to create things that are fitting the overall ethos of your brand and empowering your sales teams and understanding within the community what the value is. And then we are going to have things that we are going to distinctively measure.
Yeah, I kinda like that because we do live in a world where it's like, if you can't measure it, then, I don't wanna hear about it, or if it's not gonna give some return, then don't even bother with it. But you're kind of leaning back into a more just gut feeling like, "Hey, if the brand feels good and it feels tangible in the user's hand and it makes them inspired in any which way, like, that's what we wanna create for your company." I mean, eventually hoping that it evolves into a return on investment or whatever, but, like,
Yeah.
we wanna create something that's meaningful and resonates.
What's Daniel, we had when we started as an agency there, the goal is to be very deep, not wide, right? So we were like, we want to do two things exceptionally well across a number of different industries. And that was really strategy and creative. So we started to really bolster up and reinvest into the agency. We went through three different acquisitions that we rolled up these boutique firms into the agency to really strengthen our creative capabilities. And in 2023, when your clients start to ask you like enough, then you really pay attention. When they're saying, hey, we love to work on the creative side, but we need that digital offering. Like we need an agency recommendation that we can come along and say, hey, how do you take this creative work that's really resonating with our audiences? But then how do we assign, a return on ad spend? How do we assign a customer acquisition cost? These metrics that are important. So we did a crazy double down. We acquired a boutique media buying shop and rolled them into the agency to really be able to offer that digital capability and digital component in-house. to go what you're saying, right? That's the side that we can measure. Now to be able to hand off our work internally, say, okay, client approved it, client loves it, focus group loves it, let's run with it. And to be able to have that in house is just creating amazing efficiencies for our clients.
And I'm always happy to hear a good startup story that is one of the 5% that end up being successful, right? And you can see behind you, you got the corner office with the skyline view, so clearly everything's going well over there in St. Louis. Now, you did talk about you wanted to be deep, not wide,
Mhm.
right? And I think that brings us into, what I want to talk about next pretty well, in that you've really found your niche in this senior living community space. And I know that, y'all at EXF, you work with a lot of different companies, but when did you start to realize
Yeah.
that the senior living space in particular was in need of kind of like a big personality like yourself to really rebrand the whole experience?
Mm. Our kind of growth story, right? It's super humbling. You kind of have, I've talked about earlier, you have these pivotal moments, as any company does in growth mode, where people really believe in you and then they give you that chance to deliver on that. And for us, we were saying, hey, we're going to be really deep focus in our areas of competency or, strategy, both brand and go to market, creative and digital. And then we were serving multiple industries. So this would have been early 2021, 2022. There was this up and coming therapy provider in the senior living space called Empower Me Wellness. And Empower Me Wellness, they had an amazing vision to really impact the lives of residents in senior housing. And as they were working that vision, they really need help telling that story, but ultimately connecting that to operators. When we started working with them, I believe they were in 60 communities, and we were able to work alongside of them into 900 communities
Oh, wow.
and get this amazing firsthand experience in growing this brand and creating the resources for their sales team, their commercial team. And they really believed in us and they gave us that shot, and that really kicked the door open to us. We had a moment where we said, hey, we kind of came into this, we started to see other agencies in this industry, and we're like, there's a really big opportunity here. And what if we took our learns from ecom and D2C and our work that we were starting to roll into in the hospitality space and our work in financial services? And what if we took all these different learns, especially with special ad categories, and we really tried to reinvent the way that agencies supported the aging services space?
Mhm.
And you'll hear me say double down a lot because that's
Mhm.
from
Yeah.
we bootstrapped the agency, right? So there was that constant decision of going all in and putting all the chips back on the table. As we started to work with Empower Me Wellness, then we started to work with other aging technology companies, right? So T Care AI came into
Oh, yeah.
the mix, and then we started to work with Xer AI, and then Inspire, and all these different brands that we started to snowball. Really, this reputation of being able to understand operators and take products to market in that space. And then we got the attention of operators, and they said, what would it look like for you to run a similar playbook, but to really connect us to our audience within prospective residents? So we looked at the resident journey and we looked at that sales journey, and again, saw an opportunity to say, what does it look like to actually create and to really impact the prospect journey all the way from that first click to move in? And how does it look to not just look at the way that agencies are focusing the space, which is pretty antiquated. You were like, charging percentages of ad spend, incentivized on increased media, layering on different services. And we're like, this isn't how the industry works anymore in advertising, right? Like, let's bring all these best practices here. And it was just super well received. And again, operators gave
Yeah.
us amazing opportunities. I mean, I remember one of our first operators was Chapters Living. And I remember sitting with their CEO, Danny Stricker, who's still a friend. And he was like, hey, we want to work with an agency that just doesn't work in senior living.
Yeah.
We want an agency that can bring technology, that can bring all these other experiences. And we were able to grow that brand. And then since then, we've worked in hundreds of communities across dozens of operators. I think we onboarded 75 communities in the last 75 days. So just like breakneck speed of growth, but really the team that's here, right? That just eats and sleeps and breathes the passion of this industry is something that's been obviously a catalyst to growth, but it's been a way that we were able to really serve and support our operators and providers.
I think that's a cool start. You guys are the people that didn't work in senior living, right? It's like we
Yeah.
want somebody to rebrand us that's not kind of ingratiated into this old school style aging product branding. You mentioned a lot of specifics and how you guys are modernizing this approach, but I kind of want to take a step back and say, what were you seeing as you started to get into
Mm,
this space? Because you're not a person with that age tech or that senior care background. So you weren't in healthcare, as far as I understand, before.
yeah.
So you're probably seeing this with fresh eyes for the first time as somebody who's probably used to more dynamic marketing systems. Like, what were you seeing as you were looking around that said,
Mm,
oh, this really needs to change from not just technical and best practices perspective,
mm,
but also just in a, I can't think of a better word right now, but in a vibes perspective, right?
yeah,
In the
that's good.
sense of, oh, and you're like advertising to senior adults, like everything's very, oh, lovely, come here and
Mm.
rest. You know what I mean? It seems like you guys are shifting that up.
Our work with amazing friends and operators, Friendship Village,
Mhm.
and we had a campaign that we ran for their 50th anniversary involuntarily, right? We had seniors jumping out of airplanes, we had
Yeah.
racing Porsches around race car tracks, first pitch at baseball games. I think that a lot of it is right place, right time, right?
Mhm.
And as we listen to any journey of any company or any founder, I think what we kind of grasped on and kind of latched onto was working with operators that also want to be different. And
Yeah.
working with operators that say, yes, we manage care. Yes, we manage, through some of the most vulnerable and hardest seasons of a family's life, but also seniors are moving in earlier. And they, especially the boomer generation, right, is demanding a hospitality type experience at the community level. So
Yeah.
when you have like-minded partners and when you have, really like-minded operators that say, hey, we also are on the same mission. We want an agency that wants to put a magnifying glass under our values, under our experiences. I think that was really for us kind of a way that we started to see the industry change.
Because, the 65-year-old of today is not the 65-year-old of 40
No,
years ago. It's like, 40 years ago, you say you're 65, you're pretty much on your way out. Now you got
yeah,
people who are like, I'm running marathons at 65.
yeah,
I'm
yep,
out here climbing mountains at 65, and I want to continue to do that wherever I choose to live next. I work with a lot of older adults as a physical therapist, and I had this one woman I was working with in the hospital, and she went, I'm sure you're familiar with the villages in Florida.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and so
yeah,
unfortunately, she had to move out of the villages because her husband passed away and her kids wanted her to come back. But she was telling me, she was like, "Oh my gosh, the villages, they were heaven on earth." She was like,
yeah,
every day just golfing and drinks and hanging out
yeah,
with your
yeah,
friends. And I started to think like senior living could really be like almost like a second college experience, right? You're in
oh
this
yeah,
space
oh
where
yeah,
everybody's just
oh
ready to
yeah,
mix it up,
yeah,
Are you guys leaning into that? Because I've been
yeah,
kind of like enamored with that idea ever since.
yeah. I mean, yes, we're very much leaning into that. And I think what seniors are realizing is that they were waiting so long to move into a senior living
Mhm.
community, and that, little arbitrary numbers, but they're like 75 to 85,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like you have this peak experience, but there is this level of isolation, right?
Mhm.
Maybe you're in your home and you're in your neighborhood, and there's, people around you who are not the same age and different life stages. But there's this entire village, as
Yeah.
as you were talking about in Florida, but there's this entire community of people who think like you, who want to act like you, who want to jump out of airplanes like you,
Yeah.
or have, cocktails at 2 in the afternoon. I mean, I remember one of our first communities that we were in, and we were capturing a story of a resident. His whole thing is he came into a community wanting to walk again. Like that was his
Yeah.
goal. And he
Uh-huh.
was 80 years old, and he's like, I didn't just walk again. Like, I fell in love again. I have, and
Yeah.
pulls out his bottle of bourbon. He's like, I have bourbon with
Uh-huh.
lunch every day. Like he like is like living his
Yeah.
absolute best life. And I think that kind of, we look at that as a society. We looked at that last chapter as like, the senior population becomes a drain, right? Or it becomes like, and I think that narrative is just getting totally flipped. And
Yeah.
the ability to be able to build a brand around that is really exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, I think y'all are the people to come in and do that. I think that's why I got so attached to this idea of rebranding aging. So, with that, I mean, how are you guys actually going about this? You've talked about, skydiving and Porsche driving
Mhm.
and creating all these great experiences. Do you guys as a company just do the advertising? Do you actually get involved in creating these experiences within the community? Like how deep do you go into the communities that you work with?
Yeah, we go very deep, right? So, and it depends on the relationship of how we work with operators. So, from an agency, there's kind of two ways that we partner with an operator. There is what we would call the traditional AOR relationship, right? This kind of agency of record relationship where we are integrated in sales teams, we're integrated in the marketing team, like we're actually helping manage budget, we're setting budgets. When we're in those types of relationships, we get to deeply think outside of the box, and we get to really partner and really kind of create those fresh ideas. And we do that in a deep collaboration sense, right? We'll have our executive creative director, and we'll have an art director, we'll have our head of digital, and everyone will truly, you talk about Mad Men at the beginning of this, we truly will sit around that room and sit around that table, whiteboard ideas, understand their audience, talk to residents, pull out those differentiators, and then we'll build a unique concept to help tell that story at that local community level. Those original ideas are fun, not just to create, but then to actually have the team to execute those ideas. So that's done all in-house. And then we have this kind of other side within the agency that's more of a productized version of what's needed in the digital space, right? Like we know that the selection for a senior living community happens with two decision makers, the prospective resident themselves, and then the resident decision maker. So we look at those different audiences and we build those campaigns that allow, again, that really clear attribution story, so that when capital partners, REITs, C-suite are looking at expansion, they're looking at ground up, they're looking at acquisitions, we've actually built the model that helps them make those determining factors for growth. Some of this is obviously there's proprietary data that we have built within that.
Yeah.
But we've gone as far, our digital team and our strategy team, we can actually model out the total LTV of a lead that's generated by ExF. So what we can say is that the leads that we generate, they close faster, they stay longer, and they actually are creating a higher impact to your NOI. So having those data from a business aspect, it's a really, really unique place for us to be able to step into a meeting with some of these, REITs, capital partners, and C-suites, and to really model that out and build that. So it's kind of two sides, right? There's the AOR, building those unique ideas, executing on those ideas, truly original concepts. That's kind of the branding side. And then there's that digital side that is really modeling out and building that predictable top of funnel marketing that is needed to really fill buildings with the right residents.
Yeah, because it's fun to, talk about all these cool experiences and talk about it conceptually, but to know that it actually is resulting in outcomes that are impacting the bottom line and really making everybody happier at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
residents happier, the caregivers happier, and the operators are happier. And I want to get into that, but you had mentioned that there's, two people that you kind of have to work with, and that's something that we see a lot in the age tech world, in which you have the adult, but then a lot of times you also have like an adult caregiver, right? And so you have two people you have to market to or convince. When you're selling this story for senior living, how do you construct those stories differently for those two different audiences? And do you find that one of them's harder to convince or kind of flip the script on more than the other?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll try not to kill you with acronyms, right? We call that ICP, right? Our kind of
Okay.
ideal client persona.
Yeah.
So really the way for us to do it and the way that we've done it successfully is that the marketing journey, it has to be distinctly unique for each one of those ICPs. So when our team, when our copywriters, when our digital marketers are building those campaigns, we're building multiple campaigns. We're building campaigns around care type, from IL to AL to memory care. We're building care types geographically, dozens of different levers that we're pulling to ultimately reach the same destination and ultimately reach the same decision point. So for the resident themselves, they're entering in at the IL space, right? This independent living. Our campaigns are going to be primarily focused, right, around quality of life, around having freedom, right? Eliminating the burdens of housing, of transportation, all of these different challenges. When they're coming at the AL level, that's where we're talking more towards the resident decision makers.
Mhm.
We rarely run campaigns in IL targeted towards the adult daughter or the resident
Yeah.
decision maker. That really is almost exclusively to the senior themselves that are financially qualified to be able to make those decisions. On the AL side, we're marketing a lot on caregiver relief, on caregiver burden. We're talking about the different ways that the data that actually exists to say that you're not just your mom or your dad or your aunt or uncle will have a higher quality of life and care, but the impact that will have on your relationship, right?
Yeah.
It feels gross and selfish which we don't want to, my mom had to go into assisted living. And I would not want to be marketed that, hey, you don't have to deal with mom anymore, right? That would apply to a very awful, selfish subset of the market, right? That's not what we're talking about. But the fact that I can have the trust in an on-site caregiver to care for my mom so that I can do only what I can do, which is love my mom, right? A caregiver, he or she can do that to an extent, but I can't provide care. I can't provide medication management. I can't provide wound care. I can't provide therapy services, occupational services, like all of those different elements that really are most effective within the walls of a senior living community. So we really build those different subsets. And in memory care, from a marketing aspect, is it's usually more of an urgent matter, right? Like you traditionally, and there's, we have data trends, right? Where we're following campaigns, we know around holidays, you're back in, you're around mom or dad for more than 10 to 12 hours at a time. You're like, okay, I'm seeing something. We know the search volume that comes after Thanksgiving, the search volume that comes after Christmas. So we have those data sets. And so really being able to say, okay, we know these are more immediate decision points that need to take place. And then having, again, the power of the millions of media that's been managed through EXF within those subset and those special ad categories gives us an opportunity to really have that data for our operators to make those best decisions.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up it's about having compassion, preserving the dignity for the adult, about
Mhm.
having
Yeah.
compassion for the caregiver, and then also respecting the business aspect of the client that you have. Because I think a lot of people can think of marketing or sales kind of in that sleazy car
Mhm.
salesman perspective, right? In which I'm going to sell something to you. I'm going to get you to buy something almost like against your will or that you wouldn't have,
Yeah.
really ever bought. But, when you do the branding and the marketing and the advertising correctly, that's truly aligned with the customer needs, whether it's,
Yeah.
the operator, the older adult, or the adult
Mhm.
caregiver, you do create that win-win-win scenario where everybody comes out on top. Can you dive a little
Yeah.
bit deeper into how you work with all the parties to create that triple win scenario?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like not prepping for this, by the way. These off the cuff questions are have me thinking this is great. I think a lot of what our focus is comes down to the values that we have as an agency,
Mhm,
right? Like we eat, sleep, and breathe this, right? Our kind of overall mission as an agency is we connect people to brands that make life better.
mhm.
So when we're making decisions from an executive level, from a creative level, when we're making decisions where we're saying yes to the right partners, yes to the right operators, right providers, we can do that really naturally, right? And there is what we kind of call the dark side of advertising, right?
Yeah.
There is a very dark side of that that is pure manipulation. So for us, we're like, we have to stay away from that. And because authenticity matters so much to us in this industry and to our reputation as an agency, we look for those ways and we look for what is real and authentic within the operator. We look for what's real and authentic within the brand and to really then say, okay, that's unique and that's original. And we find that story, and there's always a story to be told, which we love, right? And you're in a senior living community and you're going through those walls, right? That there's so much passion within the caregivers in a community. It always blows my mind. Whether we're in Mobile, Alabama, or we're in Buckhead, Atlanta, people who choose to work in this industry, especially at the caregiver level, you have to care because you'll last like 6 months if you don't
Yeah.
actually love and care for people. But the people who've been there for 5, 10, 15 years, they consider it their life work to be able to walk with a senior through this last stage of their life. So when we're looking at especially that AL and memory care aspect of the industry, really being able to focus on the value that's being created. And we get to show and tell the passion of the operators and of the people who really care for the seniors.
And that's what I love about, running this podcast or just being in the age tech space is that, aging is just an inherently passionate and high
Yeah.
emotion thing, right? I mean, there's
Hmm.
so many dramas going on throughout it, whether it's love or loss or resilience, right? There's always, you can find that thread of the story. If you don't have the right person to tease that out, it can, if you look at it from the outset, just seem bland. Oh, put mom in a senior
Yeah.
living home and that's that. But, there are a lot of great stories to tell in this space, and you can tell that the passion comes through when you present it the right way.
Yeah. I would even say all the way upstream to the capital partners and REITs that we work with,
Mm,
right? I mean, the what we've seen really in the last few years is that the industry is gaining a lot of momentum and traction, is that patient capital wins, right? Is that when we're looking at that and we're working in those conversations, we're building out modeling across expansions and we build out modeling across new builds, is that the same rules that apply with growing occupancy to a level of stabilization and then to a level of profitability, the same level is reflected into their marketing strategy. I would say that the marketing often didn't have a seat at the boardroom, right? Because it was just an ancillary service that was optional. But now we're building luxury, we're building these higher impact and these higher NOI developments. Marketing is just absolutely is present because we have to build those stories, we have to build those brands in this absolute sea of decisions that we have and this quick, flick of content that we have access to. We have to stand out and we have to build that authentically.
So speaking a bit more broadly, because we've kind of focused on what y'all do with senior living facilities, but we also have a lot of innovators who watch this podcast who just broadly have age tech products or even loosely have age tech products. And a lot of them are kind of deeply in the throes of getting their startup off the ground. I know you have personal experience in this being, 100% bootstrapped coming up. So how do you recommend to startups or even a little bit more established companies of how to really start building that brand authentically from day one and, giving marketing and brand a seat at the executive table?
Yeah. If you're not passionate about it, right, you're not going to be able to push through the long days and the weekends of work and trying to get that product off the ground. You have to be passionate about it. And especially in age tech, I mean, I think that passion shines through as we, work with a dozen active right now of clients that are working through getting their product off the ground. We really focus on that story. And then we really focus on whether it's a founder led story, whether it's, people gone through a round of seed capital to build something, wherever they are in their journey is really focusing around really that deep, not wide approach. I
Yeah.
think that the most successful brands that we've been able to take to market did it with intention and they really focused on creating a deep value for their product. And we love to go fast, right? We then have had amazing speed of acceleration of growth as an agency. But when you're talking about a product, right, getting that right matters. And
Yeah.
getting that right with an operator, getting that right within a small subset is super important. Right now, I'm on the board of Stay app, which is one of the most exciting products that we've seen that is really empowering seniors to stay at home until they're ready to move into a senior living community, which
Yeah.
almost feels antithetical to our industry. But what we realize is when we're creating value for a senior, we don't want to force a senior to feel that they have to move into a senior living community. I mean, it needs to be their idea. If someone's moving in willingly with the knowledge base that they're going to receive better care and have a happier, longer life, it's going to reduce caregiver burnout. It's going to reduce staff complaints. The phone's not going to ring as much. The complaints aren't going to be as surface. So really, a product like Stay app, right, where we're able to come alongside. We're partnering with 5 operators right now, right? Like, yes, we need to get the product into the market, and we're doing. It's been great and well received, but for us, we said, hey, we want to be patient. We want to do this right. We want to have operators, and then bringing that feedback in. So often, we take products to market and whether we're raising capital, whether we create these high demands, and we have to get as many users as possible and as many paying customers as possible, which is true for any business. We need
Yeah.
to have those to have a successful business. But when we forget that the users who are day in, day out using our products, we're not talking with them, we're not putting them on our advisory boards, we're not soliciting that feedback, or at least have a method to be able to gain that feedback. I think that's something that is really paramount. And then I think that finally, the innovations obviously that exist with AI to be able to build and deploy product quickly and efficiently. We also have those abilities to be able to build roadmaps, to be able to work with integrations. This industry that we're in, the overall aging services, everyone loves to play well together. I can't tell you how many times for us on the CRM side, on the marketing automation, we've been on the phone with Further, with Welcome Home, and looking at saying, okay, how can we do this better for this operator? How can we create this new innovative marketing stack that can help 50 communities go from 85 to 92% occupancy, all those different tools. everyone is willing to play in the sandbox.
Because I think, the age tech space right now is just, it's such a market of surplus. With the growing aging population, you don't really need to be greedy with who you're bringing on as
Yeah.
customers. And it actually
Yeah.
serves the business better when you find the right customers. It's like you don't have to force a subset of customers. If you want to get residents into your senior living community, you want those residents that need and want to be in your senior living community. You don't want those residents that are going
Yeah.
to stay at home. So if a product comes on the market that helps the residents who want to be at home stay at home, that's no skin off your back, right? Because
Yeah.
those people should be there, and then the people that you need should be there. It's really about identifying and then bringing in the right people at the right time. Because I think it was cool that you added, it really creates more hassle for the company at the end of the day if you get the wrong people in your senior living
Mhm.
community or the wrong people using your product in general.
Yeah. Yeah. There's amazing products and companies out there, obviously touching and impacting every bit. One thing I love about what you guys are doing at AgeTech, I had the opportunity to speak at the Louisville conference, and you guys had that pitch competition, which was
Yeah.
awesome, right? You have these up and coming, founders that have maybe 3 or 4 customers that are
Mhm.
really trying to impact. And what was unique is every one of those brands, every one of those products had a story that was integrated to senior living. So I think that obviously you guys are doing an amazing job unearthing those founders and those products and those technologies.
So if you were working with one of those founders, kind of bringing us back to the original question, I mean, how do you take them through the process of finding their brand voice, especially if they're a little bit early on? Because, sometimes it's tough. Maybe you're speaking to the wrong customer. Maybe you're trying
Mhm.
to extend further than you should when, you're going wide when you should go deep. How do you help them find that right brand voice to target the right ICP, I think is if I could
Yeah.
steal one of your
Yeah.
acronyms.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's a blend of an amazing, talented team at EXF who just eats and sleeps and breathes, like I was mentioning earlier, the industry, and then has a knowledge base, right? Like we are so fortunate as an agency to have worked with over $500 million of equity backed companies, right? So like we have, from major players in the space, and being able to, over the last really 5 solid years, taken dozens of these products to market. So having that kind of institutional knowledge of
Mhm.
not just the marketing industry, but also the overall aging service industry. So through those discovery sessions, right, we're able to immediately eliminate some of the pitfalls that they may otherwise fall into with not knowing the industry, the terminologies, the keywords, what resonates, what stage of decision maker. If a product is trying to enter into the market at an operator level, right? How do you enter that market? We'll kind of go through that in different phases. So if they're saying, hey, we built a product that's just for IL. Okay, well, let's talk about what that looks like. Let's talk about, are you going after a COO from an operational aspect, or are you going after something on the healthcare medical side? So then building within that and looking for that very unique subset of messaging. And that ultimately that messaging, right, is impacting the overall brand.
Mhm. And now you mentioned the pitfalls. I got to ask, like, what are some of the pitfalls that these companies are often falling into?
Yeah, a lot. Really the overpromising of what their product can do in the certain stage of readiness. Right. I
Yeah.
think that so often founders, myself included, right? When early on starting Experience Fresh and other companies, you have to, in a way, right? You're like, "Oh, I can deliver on this, and I will do whatever it takes to deliver on this." But when you're working and you're talking about product, and you're talking about something that is ultimately impacting the care for a resident, right? Doing that in a way that you can truly deliver on, because that's something that within this small enough of an industry where everyone does know everyone in this industry,
Yeah.
that reputation matters more than anything. I think that if I was talking to founders who were maybe more on the early stage side, of really being okay to lean into where they are in their story and where they are in
Yeah.
their journey. That's something that they don't need to be ashamed of and need to hide behind. It's something that we could say, hey, we have a few customers, or we are early stage, and really embracing that, because the products will speak for themselves, the quality will speak for themselves, and to really be able to lean into that will be avoidant of our pitfalls. And then also bringing on the right capital, right?
Yeah.
Depending on where the founder is in their journey, is, if they are doing a round, right, bringing on capital that understands the industry, bringing on capital that understands, I mentioned patient capital, bringing on the right partners is paramount. And then on the capital side, and also right partners in the industry, one of the first things that we did, not on my own, right? That someone suggested is that we form an advisory board within the industry. And we did. It was amazing, right? We have amazing leaders in our advisory board that we would consider titans in the industry, from the healthcare side to the product side to the operator side. And those advisory board members are willing and loving to make introductions for us. So that's something that's been really valuable for us, is a really strong advisory board.
It's funny, for a little cross advertising, you said the same thing as my last guest, Sarah Thomas from AgeTech Capital, right?
Yeah.
Talking about don't overpromise. Like, she's speaking from if I'm going to fund you, right? Like, you're
Mm,
essentially marketing yourself to me. Like, don't
yeah.
come in here trying to act like you can do things that you can't do. And conversely, like, I want to be able to see, as somebody who's going to invest in your company, that you know what your lane is and that you have a
Yeah.
strong sense of identity. So it's not only that you need this marketing and branding voice to attract customers, but also, if you're an early stage startup, you need this marketing and branding voice to, attract the right capital. It's kind of cool to see you guys, both on the same
That's
page.
cool.
Yeah.
That's encouraging.
So I know you guys were 100% bootstrapped. I mean, you guys have recently done a little bit of a rebrand yourself, right? From
We have.
Experience Fresh to EXF. What were some of the personal tips and tricks that you saw? I think it's kind of interesting. You're a branded company and now you have to do that for yourselves. It's kind of like, oh man, you got to, put my money where my mouth is type
Yeah.
situation. So, what are some of the tools that you used personally in creating the brand for EXF?
Yeah. We wanted to rebrand that entire brand in-house, right?
Mhm.
That was really important for us. We brought our entire staff along for that journey. So when we branded to EXF, and we kind of had a little bit of our in-house rebranding party,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
to really have that tie into the mission and really the vision of what we're doing as an agency. For us, EXF, originally Experience Fresh,
Yeah.
fun fact, was the available URL.
Oh
so
yeah.
someone's always said, like, hey, tell us about it. I was like, well, originally the company was just called Fresh, right? And then, when you're,
Yeah.
in your 20s, early 30s, you're like, well, everyone's just going to know what Fresh means. So Experience Fresh, right? And the idea was that, Fresh was the agency, and Experience Fresh, we wanted to experience the agency different. So then the name stuck for the sake of the URL. And then the recent pivot to EXF. And the reason there's a EXF, it really is just kind of that mark. If you go to our website, right, you kind of see that X as that kind of interchangeable, right? And that is that kind of X factor, is what is that
Mhm.
can change across creative, across strategy, across digital, all the different components that really make up an amazing marketing partnership and an amazing marketing journey, is really tied into that X.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I had to lurk on your LinkedIn and your website to, prepare for this. And you guys told a good story. I was on the website. I was like, okay, then these guys, they know what they're doing, right? Is it stressful when you're a marketing and branding company creating your own brand and going like, oh my gosh, this is essentially the first platform that I'm going to show people what I can do, right? Because it's like your brand doesn't come across well, your story doesn't come across well.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to do that for anybody else, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all know the cobbler's kids, right? With no shoes, right? We all
Oh, yeah.
we all
Yeah.
know that story. We've made it a priority for us as we've grown. We have an in-house dedicated marketing lead. She's amazing, from everything from conferences to social content, personal branding content for our leaders. Really to be able to say, hey, we are investing in this. And it's something that I would say, Daniel, comes up in almost every pitch, right? If we're not willing to really not just drink our own Kool-Aid,
Yeah.
right? But we're not willing to say, hey, when we do X, we see a value and return on that. How can we speak to it with as much confidence as we do? So for us, it is, yes, leading and going through that branding exercise, and putting a significance on that, but then also putting true dollars behind that, and really dedicating a portion of our revenue towards marketing that's impacted us, right? And we're able to say, hey, we invest in our own marketing, and then we are able to show those results and to show the growth that we've had. So it becomes a much easier story to tell when you're in a pitch, and when you're sitting there, and you're saying, hey, you should really do this. There's value here because we can speak to it firsthand.
Yeah. And to go back to one of your themes, you got to double down on your own approach, right?
And double down. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to make a little bit of a hard turn for our last topic here. Obviously, AI is one of the bigger topics, right? There's a huge pull towards individuals who are, bootstrapped or young companies to just say like, maybe I could just have like AI create my whole brand for me. But I feel like this world of kind of what people would call AI slop, has kind of put a premium on kind of
Mhm.
truly creative leaders with a vision like y'all have at EXF. But how do you think that the branding with AI and, the AI companies, how is that going to interact so that we can continue on this thread of creating the right branding that truly
Mm,
creates a human vision rather than just kind of leaning into these kind of mass produced brands that don't really resonate, that don't look
yeah,
bad to anybody, but
yeah.
don't also resonate with anybody.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up AI, right? We have to talk about it.
Mhm.
If we don't talk about it, we're not leveraging it and utilizing it. We were in a pitch last week. I'll tell a personal story behind this. So every one of our team members, right, the 35 plus employees here, they all have their own agents. Right? They're all leveraging and
Yeah.
utilizing AI every day. What we do is we have AI transparency in all of our client reporting.
Mm.
So we're open with our clients. There's no veil of how we use AI and what we're leveraging AI for. And then we even go down on that level to show the cost savings that are being generated because we're leveraging and utilizing AI.
Okay.
So over the last 12 months, our fee structure as an agency has not gone up. Our fee structure has actually decreased by about 15 to 20% in certain service lines because of the utilization and leveraging of AI. And agencies, when they're not transparent around that, that immediately creates that level of distrust in an early partnership or relationship.
Yeah.
And then how we're using on the branding side, right? We firmly believe that when you are selling a product that is so human centric and that is so focused on true emotional connection and trust, that using AI exclusively for that is actually breaking that trust.
Mhm.
How can a sales leader sit across from a family and show them a story that's not real? Right?
Mhm.
Or to build that and to be able to use it as a selling point, not for us to our operators and to our partners, but to be able to use it as a selling point for an operator to a prospective resident is something that's truly unique. We hope the AI continues in the conversation in that sense of saying, hey, this is where we're using it, right? There's beauty in that, right? There's efficiencies that are created, but really be able to cut through the noise and using true human connection is something that's just helping us stand out as an agency.
Actually really like that idea of AI transparency and that you really pin down on the trust issue around AI. And I think you're probably the first to really articulate that, at least to me, because it is true in the fact that like what most people don't have a problem with the fact that AI is being used. They know it
Mhm.
is, but it's that feeling of like, you're trying to sell that as your own,
Yeah,
right? It's like, "Oh, you're putting that in front of me and acting like I don't know that that's AI," and it does
yeah,
break that
yeah.
trust between you. It's not the exact same situation, but, me and my wife recently moved into a new apartment, and their call desk, there's an AI agent, and she has a name, and she talks to you, and it's like it's pretending like it's not an AI on the background, and they even go as far to, like, put, like, call desk sounds in the background, like
Oh
the
my
AI
gosh, yeah,
woman is
yeah.
is
Laugh tracks, yeah,
working. Yeah, yeah, it's like
yeah,
she's working in an office, and it's like, "I don't have a problem that you're gonna screen me with AI,
yeah,
whatever, I'm
yeah,
putting a service request, but, like, don't treat me like I'm dumb," you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I've been able to just jump that whole problem by saying, "Of course we use AI, the whole
yeah,
world's using AI, but here's where we're using it, and also here's where you get the benefit of it." So it's
yeah,
like, you're not trying to save a bunch of time just so you get the profit, you make me feel like I'm getting a part of that profit as well.
yeah.
And I think that's a really, really cool approach that I've actually never heard before, so I'm gonna take that with me.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
encouraging, man. That's encouraging.
yeah,
That's great.
I like it. That's been some really good stuff. I appreciate you sharing your insights. We covered a lot of bases today. I mean, we're reaching towards the end of our time.
We'll see you on the West Coast here in towards the middle of September, right?
Well, I sure hope so. Traveling's always tough, but hopefully
Yeah,
we get together at one of the AgeTech Connect events coming up.
yeah,
With that being said, where can the people get in contact with you? If you
yeah,
have a early stage startup or a senior living facility that, wants to utilize your services, or even just young startups who want to have a good conversation.
yeah. I would say LinkedIn. Yeah, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn. I respond within 24 hours, and always open for a conversation.
Very cool. Well, Brett, again, super appreciate you being out. Again, hope to link up with you soon at one of
Yeah,
these Tech Connect conferences.
it's gonna be great. Thanks for the time, man. It was great.
For sure.